Hi, I'm IKEA, and for today's video I wanted to have a little bit of a ramble on some of the words that we use. And that's mostly on words like effective, viable, fun, and good, as they get used without context quite often and quite wrongly to me. And I just wanted to basically give some insights to how I think about them, and also some insights to what I enjoy playing and what kind of future content you could expect from me, as I will mostly show stuff that I enjoy. As I have surprised some people with some of the choices for build showcases and such, as a lot of people have seen me be the arbiter of good, as one person once called me in a heated discussion, in a bad context. But while some see me as that, perhaps, as I do push people to quite often min-max, and even to do so with builds that aren't, where the intent isn't to be meta, basically, but something else. Even there, I feel that you should try to min-max, and that min-maxing, at least for me, is its own fun. It's fun in that context of a challenge of trying to figure out what is the best way of putting even a bad build together. And to have a little bit of footage in the background, actually, and I will split it up into the two chapters of this gameplay, is that I'm going to do 2 runs of Lincoln, one in a build that is definitely not effective, but viable enough, and in a different build that a lot of people do not believe to be effective, and I will show that it actually is quite effective. And I'm going to basically ramble on in the background about some of the things. Now, I will not show this first build before we head in here, as I want you to take a little bit of a guess and try to figure out what kind of build it is. Of course, you can see some of my talents and such on the bar already, so you can get some guesses from there. But the full build I'll show at the end, and especially the people that do personally know me, they will have instantly actually guessed it, because there are some telltale signs, but if you do not know them, it might actually not be instantly understandable. Now, I have again some of these guys outside of Lincoln, and I do want to kill them before I head in, because I don't want to deal with them and the True Sons altogether. We are on heroic, we are without directives. This is the week of the global event, but I have also turned off the global event, as that would actually make this easier, so just to give myself a little bit more of a challenge. And as you can already see from the numbers and such and how fast stuff is dying, this isn't the most effective build, but it is viable. It is still killing, it is still going through here at a pace that isn't a snail's pace. It is effective enough to use both those terms. And actually, let me expand on what I usually mean when I say viable. Viable, it's basically the line of how good a build is, how strong a build is. Viable is basically the point where it can do most of the content in a time that is reasonable. So for missions and such, it would be that you can do them in something like Lincoln. If you can do it under 20 minutes, it's likely viable. And 20 minutes is a very long time for Lincoln. But effective then is basically the upper echelons of that bar. It is that this is the top 2-3% of the bar, where it is going through in 7 minutes, 8 minutes, which is still plenty of time for most builds. As yeah, likely you can, I know you can shave it down to under 6 minutes. But But those terms as well, they are within context. Something can be effective inside missions, for instance, and be a lot less effective outside of missions. And one of the things that I very strongly feel is that the recommendation has, for a long time, also for solo players, has been to run red builds. And what red builds, well, in the past, it basically meant one thing, one singular thing, which was to have a high-end red build with crit chance, crit damage, vigilance obliterate or vigilance glass, the builds that we've all grown up with, especially if you've been in this game for longer. And I don't actually really agree with that choice anymore. I used to be in the same camp, and I've slowly moved out of it, especially as I've noticed that a lot of players are not as good at shooting, as say it plainly, as some of the people making the recommendations, and that affects how effective they are with that build and how effective that build will be for them. As for instance, here I will give away that, I mean, I wouldn't even need to give away, but as you can see from my armor bar, I do not have any armor cores. So that means that this is a red build, even though you do not know what it is. And yeah, these of course are effective. They're the lifeblood of basically most of the game, of how we do content. And that hasn't changed. While they have been overtaken by some other builds, the high-end ones especially are the ones that I'm referring to at that point.
Immediate medical assistance.
Well, they have been overtaken by something like Striker, and even Heartbreaker even still has overtaken them, even though it is no longer in the main running. Basically, Striker has overtaken both of them, so a lot of people will not be running Heartbreak anymore. And as you can see here, for instance, this build is struggling with this wave of elites. It's not killing fast enough. It's getting, and because of that, it is getting surrounded by stuff. And even here, for instance, I'm choosing to shoot outside of my optimal, just because I don't want to close that gap much more than I was doing there. But it is still viable for this. And one thing that it also is somewhat fun in its
Agent out of action.
how much of a challenge it is, because yeah, the faster you kill them, of course, the faster they do not shoot back, and the less you have to deal with enemies. And here I've also ran out of health packs, so I am actually that owner is dead, so I am going to go after this final red. And the reason I'm doing that is once it's just me and the boss, this isn't actually an issue, because I can close the distance, force him into that animation, and then his backpack goes, and then his body goes.
All clear. I repeat, the compound is all clear.
And yeah, so a build like this is struggling here, and so am I, because it's also, yeah, as I alluded to with the Headhunter one, it's not just the build, it's also the player behind it. And I'm not the best player. I will not try to convince you that I am the best player, but I also know that I'm not the worst player.
Rogue agent detected.
And here we have rogues as well. I'm actually considering maybe swapping off and dealing with them, but actually let's stick with this build and see how this build does against them. As of course, I also, as you see on my back, I do not have
Hostile defender drone
an
detected.
Scorpio, which would be the choice here. I did not see what kind of drone that was. I thought it was a healer drone, but it was not.
Detected.
Once this pulse has gone off, I will actually swap it to foam and use that to CC with, because I need something to CC with, because they're pushing me hard and I do not have a good answer for them.
Vital signs critical.
The annoying thing here is that they're both together, so I don't want to get shot by both, as I also do not have a hive. But also, if I die here, if you didn't know yet, if you die to rogues, it isn't the biggest issue because you do get a checkpoint, basically. It's not like normal heroic where you get set back all the way to the start. In 2 seconds, I will have a foam again, which is the thing I'm waiting on. We'll try to get them with a foam grenade, and I do. I will actually put some damage in them. What I'm afraid of is that they will start firing. Once it's down to 2v1, I'm hoping they will not fire back before I kill them. They do not. Here, I'm just going to wait for my foam again. And I have to do this. I'm on a weaker build. Just going to move in here and deconstruct that. Just for if they stand there, I don't want to deal with that. Okay, and we have that. So here I will actually try to time a foam grenade as well. They rolled the wrong way, which works out for me. And yeah, so here, if I was on a more effective build, I wouldn't need to cheese this basically. I'm going to wait for my foam. Foam back and up. And there should be enough for me to kill them if I actually do actually kill them instead of hitting the wall. Nothing worthwhile keeping.
Damn it.
And that actually was about the same length as this room would take normally.
Isaac can't access data on this location.
But yeah, there you saw a build that I called
What are we walking into?
less effective. Still take out rogues. It still killed them. Even though I, of course, use tactics that I know work against them. And that's the thing. You can get more effectiveness out of a build if you know tactics for them. In the same way, that's also why in the master classes, oh, actually, I'm full on ammo. I didn't notice there. I do put a section on tactics where I go through some of the tactics for a build, because I feel that that part is actually quite important to a build itself. There, for instance, if I did not know how effective foam is against rogues, I would have. There was no way of beating that fight. And I got lucky with them also not rolling the right way. Here I'm going to foam that heavy and I'm going to kill the rest. I actually did not remember to swap back to my pulse, which I really do like having for these kinds of fights. But I've backpacked the heavy already, and I'm going to go across. One of the things you see me do here is one of the tactics that works well as well is just to change your direction of assault. Enemies will often be still aiming at the wrong direction. And having given a little bit of a red insights into a red build, how to play them. Let's go back to the original discussion, which was words. And while it is all about semantics, of course, this isn't going to change everything. But how you use words and how you use them to convey information to others is very important. Oh, we have a spawn from a very strange angle there, which isn't very common for solo. Actually, we have a lot of things in this video with rogues and also a weird spawn that is quite rare. What you basically can infer from when I talk about viable is that it's good enough. When I say effective, it's actually something that you should keep an eye on. So for instance, Pulse is viable against those rogues. Pulse was viable, just it shows me where they are, it shows me what skills they have deployed in places and such. But Foam is effective. Foam made that fight doable, where it would have not been that easy without it. And yeah, that is actually important to differentiate between, especially also giving context as to where it is effective. It's also why I usually do give, if I'm talking about builds, I basically go about where I feel that they work best. Like with the Fire Eclipse video where I specifically was talking about heroics as that is where I feel that build is the most effective, where some in legendaries it can struggle because it loses effectiveness against legendary enemies. And we're making our way slowly through here, and again, pretty slowly, but still, not the worst. I'm taking more hits than I should. I'm not placing myself the best, but that's also, I'm talking while I'm playing, so that always does hamper me a little bit. And honestly, I don't really play red builds as much anymore because, yeah, to me, they aren't the most effective choice anymore for especially solo.
That should keep them from getting more
And in a second, I will actually show what I feel the most effective choice is for solo. And that's also one of the things that, yeah, the reasons why I wanted to make this video is that build will also be the subject of the next masterclass. And I've already, through the years, some people feel that I should not recommend those kinds of builds, or, well, the build that I'm going to use in a second, which is, I'll just straight up say it's a tech tank. And while they are called tech tanks, they are more bruisers. They aren't tanks. They are tanky, but they aren't tanks. And I feel that giving up some effectiveness in one position to gain it in a different one is actually not the worst choice. And I already know that a lot of people agree with me, as a lot of people have tried out my recommendations and come to similar conclusions. Even people that were very much into one specific type of build, which used to be the red build, have slowly migrated towards having a little bit more survivability when they play solo. So not so much for group content, but especially for solo, they have chosen to go a little bit more towards having a little bit more of a balanced build almost. I tried to get him before he went immune. He did not actually go immune, which is interesting. He did get me with his grenade. I was hoping to get his backpack before that. And I need to be able to aim to actually get his backpack, but I also had gotten his backpack.
The team from the campus has taken position.
And there we have that, and I am going to deconstruct that for its components. And while we head up this elevator, I'm actually going to leave the rest of the loot.
If you hadn't stopped them, I know.
As I am going to do a second run through here, I'll just grab them then. And yeah, so this build was got through here. I actually do want to check the time before I actually show show what it is, because I am actually curious about it myself, as I'm not sure if the rogues actually cost us time or gained us time. But there we had a solo heroic run of Lincoln in 15.5 minutes. And that is actually really slow. That is, you could, if you were with a good team, you could definitely do 2 runs of Lincoln in that time. With a good solo build, you could do 2 runs of it in that time. And to actually show the build, it was my purple build, my build that is a joke build, and I just run this just for the challenge. But I just wanted to run it here just for stuff to show that viable, it can mean a lot of things, and it can mean too many things. And that's why I don't really like using that word unless I give specific context of why it is viable or why it can be a choice. Because this is, of course, this is not something that you should ever really make unless you are a little bit more insane. As you can see from the stats as well, you can, if you're wondering, you cannot optimize purple gear, so you are locked into what you get, and that makes it quite hard to get some of the gear for it. That means that also, yeah, you end up with stuff like this chest where I basically am missing a ton of parts on this bar, but this is the best I have for this, and this is actually more than most people even have on their purple builds. But even on the full parts, you can see that even a maxed out is only 13 weapon damage versus the 15. Same. I thought I had another stat full, but I do not actually. But yeah, even crit chances and crit damages are less full. But even a build like this is viable. Is it effective? No. And that is quite important to always differentiate between. If you're only going to talk about viability of something, then it quickly becomes, yeah, but everything is. People have run missions, heroic missions, with gray builds, mostly using their turret and the drone, which is somewhat cheesy, but sure, why not? But even a build like this can go through heroic content here without directives, but even if I had a few directives, it wouldn't really hamper me as much as you would think, because it just slows it down a little bit more. It doesn't make it not be able to go through it. But having shown this purple build, now let's grab something that I feel is very effective for solo play. And the game crashed, but we'll be back in a second with that build at link. And here we are back from that crash, and one other crash actually as well. And I'm going to now show the same run basically with a build that I do consider effective, but I know some others do not. And that is this with this tech tank, this Heartbreaker tech tank, which I also feel is probably the most effective variant of it. And we're going to run Lincoln again on heroic, no directives, and just have a talk, especially about two other words that get used a lot, and that is fun and good. And one thing I actually just want to point out before we head in is I'm running a memento. I'm without any memento stacks. I'm completely empty. And I actually do have a grade 20 Kingbreaker available, but I'm actually not using that because that would actually increase the output here, and I just to give it a fairer assessment, basically, as yeah, a grade 20 weapon isn't available to everyone. And here, I'm gonna rush in, and from the first moment, it should be clear that this build is a lot more effective than the other one, just in how I can play it. And that is that I can just rush up here, ACS that guy, ACS that guy, turn around, ACS this guy. I'm on halfway stacks, kill that one, and then just push on. And yeah, you can clearly see that this build is instantly a lot more effective, of course. And it should be. This is an actual build. This is a build that is made to be ran, not just for its challenge. And there where, with that build, the fun of it was in the context of challenge. This build is also fun to me, but here the context of fun is quite different. And that's also one of the reasons that I quite dislike the word fun, as it is a little bit meaningless without the context. And actually, if you just give the context, you don't even need the word fun there anyway. You just have the context of why you should choose it. And the context of why this one is more fun is that I can play it towards my pace. I dictate pace here, not the enemies. Where with the red build, even a good one, so not even the purple one that I was running a second ago. Here you can see I'm just tanking stuff. I just doesn't matter. I'm just going to push in here, kill everything. And while I got pretty close to losing my shield, I didn't. While I got really close to dying, I didn't. And that's also because I do know the boundaries of this build quite well. It is a build that I do run quite a lot. Here I'm actually going to go up and take the high ground a little bit. One thing I do want to point out here is that even at this kind of ranges, the ACS is going to outperform the Kingbreaker at stacking. If I had a FAMAS, it would be different, but there I'm back to close to full stacks, which I need for Heartbreaker, of course. I was hoping that wave would spawn, and they did, but just later than I expected. And yeah, this build, the context of its fun is in its aggressiveness. I get to play hyper aggressively. So here, especially with that, this build gave me quite some issues, as you saw with that other build. Here, not so much. I can just sit here. My shield is going to get healed up back in a second. All of the damage that they did to it was not enough to go through it, and got healed before they broke it. And here again, it's pretty low, but actually there, I mistimed it and wasted the heal. But even this elite, I'm just going to rush him, or the boss, I'm just going to, heavy, I'm just going to rush him, get him to go into the animation of punching, and in that time I have all the time in the world to finish killing him, basically.
All clear. I repeat, the compound is all clear.
Yeah, that aggressive kind of gameplay, that is fun to me. But there I'm using it in a very specific context, but what I could much more easily say is that I like playing aggressive. I like playing at my pace instead of the enemy's pace. And that's why I like this build, without using the word fun at all. And that's because, yeah, fun is... it's more of a marketing word than anything. It is there for someone to basically put the idea in your head of, think of something fun, and then, okay, yeah, this build is that. And without any context, it's impossible to even know what they are actually really implying. And a lot of people will use that. And they will also put good and fun into basically in competition to of each other. And that one is also, to me, always the very dumb thing to do, as those two aren't on the same line. Where viable and effective are, they're basically on the line of a good build. The line of, you could basically see them as a table where where effective and viable are on one line with each other. Fun and good are actually one is a horizontal line, one is a vertical line, so to say. And you can have a good build that is fun, and you can have bad builds that are fun. You can have unfun builds that are good, and unfun builds that are bad, and the only really one that doesn't get used at all in there is, of course, the unfun bad ones. But even, for instance, I do not enjoy Headhunter as much. A lot of people do. A lot of people really actually also enjoy running that type of build. And when I say Headhunter, I mean specifically Headhunter with Regulus, or currently with Determined, of course, as well, being quite broken. But even the Regulus variant, where it is used basically to door camp, and it is quite often just thrown out there as yeah, it is the speedrunner's choice, so you should totally run it. I do not agree with that. And that is that, first off, not everybody is in it to speedrun. And to me, it's also a really unfun build because it's frustrating. It's when it is, while it is fun when it works in the context of being very super effective, the second that you run into issues, the fun drops for me. And also, I feel that it is a little bit cheesy, especially with its door camping capabilities, where I am pretty okay with it, the way it gets used to just go headshot after headshot, because that still does require some skill. The way that some people use it just to camp doors and such is just inherent. It feels a little bit cheesy, and also to me, I feel that it's an imbalanced build. But in the same way as Striker and such, imbalanced builds exist, and it is up to you if you want to use them, and also if you're okay with using them, and also if you want to learn them. For instance, for me, Headhunter isn't a build that I enjoy running, so while I'm good enough with it, I can run it in in a fashion that is acceptable and likely better than some. I haven't put the time into it to be really good with it, as some people have. But that build for me is basically unfun, but very effective. So good in that context. And yeah, this build to me is fun and good, which is something I would much rather run. As yeah, I can just burn through bosses still. I can still be very effective, and here of course I'm solo, and this is what this build is also mostly for, is solo. I wouldn't choose to run this build in groups, except for in open world or in summit is where I actually do run this kind of build also in groups. But for a solo build, I prefer this 1,000 times more than running a mission like this with a red build. And that makes it more fun to me. But again, we could just leave that whole fun word out of it and just go, this is a lot more effective. I get to play to a playstyle that I quite enjoy a lot more. And in a way that I feel moves a lot faster, even though it doesn't, it feels faster. It's the cabriolet effect. And if we look here at our time, 8:35, and that's even with me talking and playing and actually not paying way. I could clean up that time by quite a lot just by paying attention to what I'm doing. And yeah, that makes builds like this also effective, where a lot of people would not use the word effective to mean this. They would call something like this viable. And I disagree with that. And that's kind of basically the premise of this video, is to, yeah, at least have you know where I stand on some of the meta, so to say. As I feel, to me, for instance, something like this is meta for solo. This is, to me, the meta for solo. A lot more so than a red build. And while I can understand others disagreeing with me, and of course that is always the premise of everything, is where two people would agree, a third one can be found to disagree with you. I feel that these are more than effective for all of the solo content in the game. And that also basically leads me to the end of this rambling video. And this was just mostly to give you a little bit of insight into what I feel matters, and what words, how words should be used, as I still see, fun just being plastered all around, and also fun against good being used to say it's more important to have a fun build than a good build. I don't agree with that. I'd rather have a good fun build. Those two are not on the same line. Those two aren't mutually exclusive to each other. It isn't fun on the one end and good on the other end. It's that is a chart that is, one is on a horizontal line, one is on the vertical line of it. And yeah, I hope that just gives you a little bit of insight on how to use these words, and at least also that you know what I mean when I use them. And this was also more of a video just as, again, yeah, I am still recovering from having been ill for a few days, and my voice, especially, as I can even feel now, is falling apart. There was just something to tide us over. As, yeah, the next one will likely be a build showcase on turret drone hybrids, as those are also quite interesting build, and I will likely only do it on the negotiator one, as that is, I feel, the most effective variant. And afterwards, a tech tank build, or a tech tank build masterclass will come of especially tech tanks, as yeah, I feel these are well worth showing to people and having more people try them out, as I feel they fit a lot of people playstyles very well. And I hope you join me for those future videos. Have a good night.